and really reflect on how all of us have been touched by him in some way, shape, or form, whether it be a friend, a mentor, a father, a fellow competitor. He has had such an extraordinary life, and it's just such a pleasure to have you here, Bob, to tell us a little bit about it. But we're honoring great cars, and as Bob points out in his book, good people, because he thought if we said great people, it would be a little elitist. So without much further ado, welcome to the candy store, and I will turn it over to Gary and to Bob.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you all for coming. There's some empty chairs, so you can move up bench if you want. This is a real pleasure for me because I had a great opportunity in putting this little project together. What we're going to do is give you a little kind of a preview of the book. And the good news is the books did arrive. The Brinks armored car brought them in. They fought off a couple of attempts to hijack the truck. They know how valuable this commodity is, but they're here, and you'll be getting one on your way out the door. So we're going to give you a little preview of the book. Bob has some stories he wants to embellish the little slides that we put together, and we're going to jump right into it. If you please hold your questions till the end, we're going to have ample QA time. This probably won't take more than 25 minutes or so to go through this part. So we're off and running. That's the book. And it became known as the book. So we want to talk right from the beginning how the idea got started. And actually it's obviously started with Bob first, but you can tell the story about the encouragement you got.
Yeah, the genesis of the book. Several of my friends a few years ago talked to me about the history that when I pass will go away of the early days of sports car road racing and big boat sailing in the bay and the collector car world, concourse. And I debated on writing a book for some time, but these individuals were pretty insistent. They included Phil Riley, Ivan Zaremba, Ron Young, Short House, St. Francis Joplin, Jay Hewlin, Tom Oppenheim, all sorts of people, Don Williams, and Tim McCrane. And Tim McCrane was the manager for Don Williams in the Bering Museum. That's when I met him. Of course, I've known Don as a dear friend for decades. But they all pressed upon me the significance is not the importance of writing these things down. So I finally did. Excuse me. And that's where Tim McGrain came in. He went to Laguna Seca, was general manager down there, and looked into the archives of Laguna Seca and found out where I was, one of the early people down there, and had a lot to do with Laguna Seca and introducing it to the world. And I had known Gary Discord through Bruce Trenery at Fantasy Junction. So Tim wanted me to write up a story that he could publish in the magazine, the Laguna Seca magazine. So I introduced him to Gary. And Gary wrote a lovely story, a two-page story that appeared in the Laguna Seca magazine. And that really is the genesis of the book. I just decided in 2019 to start writing this book. And so 4 years ago, right, Gary? Well, we had COVID, of course, and that just slammed put the doors on, so it just shut us down, really, to have regular meetings, and we had to do everything by snail mail and email and telephone, and we couldn't meet anymore, so...
We don't ever get ahead of the slides.
I'm getting ahead of
We've been ahead of the slides all.
I've been ahead of myself all my life.
I got involved, I met I'd be interested in doing an article for the upcoming historics. They wanted to go back to the origins of the mistake and so on. And he suggested Bob's name, and so he gave his contact information. I called, we talked, and the result was this article in the program for the Monterey Historics. So that really started the process really rolling. It took the idea that Bob was being encouraged by his friends to another level, because now we have something in print that had covered a good part of his life through road racing, up to road racing.
Can you go back to the slide?
Yeah.
111 was a highly modified Triumph TR2 that Rusty Hyde was the distributor and owned the car. I helped build that car. We actually took the body out and drilled the frame to lighten it. Bill Breeze did the engine and carburetions. He had all kinds of carburetors, including 4 motorcycle carburetors at one time. We ended up with 2-inch SUs. We lowered the headlights to get a little more streamlining and made a modified car out of it. It was very successful. I think that picture is probably from Arcata, and I'm not sure we even had seatbelts, and maybe we did. We didn't have any roll bars, and that helmet was loaned to me by my cousin, who was an Air Force ace and jet pilot. I think it was paper mache. Anyway, that's an early picture. On the upper right is my MGTD in Minneapolis, and we raced on the ice at Lake Fallon and St. Paul, the St. Paul Winter Carnival.
We'll get there, we'll get there.
Oh, we're going to get there.
The picture in the lower right-hand corner, I think of all the hundreds of pictures we looked at, is the one that I liked the most. The expression on his face is just pure determination, focus and determination. And I think those are 2 of the traits I think he carried with him his whole life and made him so successful. That's a great picture. From Santa Barbara. So the original concept, when we sat down and talked about doing the book, was a small little book, for family remembrance of what grandfather had done and so on. And the 3 main categories were, as Bob mentioned, sports car racing, big boat sailing, and collector cars. So that was a nice little, 30, 40-page e-book, something like that. Things changed. As we got talking and we started to develop an outline and started to look at some of the early pictures, we realized that maybe this is going to be a little bigger than 40 or 50 pages. So the original audience scope was broadened to folks like yourself and some of the other clubs that Bob's enjoyed. The process we went through is nothing unusual when writing a book. We did interviews in person, and then the pandemic came along, and that became phone calls. I used the digital recorder for recording the conversations. That's really what they were conversations. Then I'd bring them home, transcribe them, and then select the key parts out of each of the transcriptions and put them in a bit of an order. We had a rough outline. We didn't have all the chapters because we were working on those 3 or 4 ideas initially. But those were developed over time. I can't tell you how many photographs we looked at. Bob said, they're all in the basement. So I'll bring them up, and I'll mail them to you what I can find, and then we'll go from there. Well, they kept coming in the mail. So I scanned them all, and then we go through the process of selecting those as we did the text. We went into a little broader chapter development as we understood how far we wanted to take this. I was sending information back to him over the computer regularly so he could review that and see if it was the direction he wanted to go. Now, keep in mind that this is 7 steps right here that you could read in about 30 seconds. That was 4 years it took to do all that back and forth, the pandemic, all the photos. You kept discovering other photos that we wanted to include, more text and so on.
Yeah, let me jump in. My father's hobby was photography, and he became quite an expert at it in the 20s and 30s. He also loved cars. But I went through at least 1,000 negatives and photos that Dad had taken. And many of them are in the beginning of this book. Some of these pictures are over 100 years old. So all of this took a lot of time.
And the story begins. This is page 1. This young fellow apparently had a successful career. And so we started with that photograph. And we jump right into chapter 1. These chapters, the book is 224 pages long. There are 12 chapters and 2 appendices. So some of the chapters are brief, others are longer depending upon the subject. So the family history, born in Evanston, Illinois, moved to Minnesota, raised in Minnesota. Brother and a sister. The sister was a concert pianist. Brother was an Army intelligence officer and a stockbroker. Dad was a corporate executive in Minnesota and then was asked to go to Washington to become a key member in the Department of Agriculture because of his association with agriculture in Minnesota. So they moved around a little bit from Minnesota to Maryland and back. And you can see the family down there below.
Yeah,
An early shot.
That's in Evanston, Illinois. A little bit about my dad. He was born in 1890. His father and family had just moved down from Dawes Mills in Canada in 1889. And my dad was in his early 40s. He was born on a farm in St. Joe, Missouri. So he developed into a grain man and a grain expert. And he had the position of executive VP for the largest grain concern in the United States, Nice Next in the 30s. And because of the profligacy of the owner, the company went out of business. Dad left, started his own co-op in grain in the Midwest. And the government noticed that all his good things, and he was asked, when he's still in his 40s, to come to Washington and work alongside Jesse Taft, who then was the president of Bank of America. And the two of them developed the Farm Prairie Program, Commodity Credit Corporation, and so forth. And they asked Dad, still in his 40s, if he would leave the civil service and join the government and go to London and become in charge of all the grain concerns of the United States outside of the United States, is worldwide. So he was on a fast track. But of course I was very young. I had no idea what was going on, 5 or 6 years old. But it was the late 30s. And Dad decided that I'm not moving my family to London in the late 30s. And he would have had to do.
Good decision.
Yeah. So we moved from Chevy Chase, Maryland, where we were living for a couple of years, to Minneapolis. And they appointed him as the director of the Commodity Credit Corporation. And it was the largest office of the Department of Agriculture outside of Washington. You know, General Mills and Cargill and all the big firms were in Minneapolis at the time. And so that's why I really grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and went through the university there. So that's a story on my father.
He's got another distinction too. He went to the White House Easter egg hunt twice.
Yeah, Dad became very familiar with a lot of, well, he was quite gregarious. So was my mother, my 5'1" Irish Spitfire. She was quite a girl. They got to know themselves pretty well in Washington, so we befriended some people, which maybe we'll talk about it later, but you'll read about it in the book. There's a humorous incident that occurred many years later. But we moved back to Minneapolis, and that was 1940, I think. So I was 7 really. So I hardly remember, but I do remember the long drive with my sister, who was 9 years older than I, my brother 5 years older, my mother, and a gal who was living with us, in fact, was her name. And all of us in the 39 Buick drove from Chevy Chase to Minneapolis. I remember that.
His mother also taught him to drive. So she obviously did a pretty good job because of what happened to him.
Yes, she taught me in that 39 Buick took out to the airport.
There's the car that we were talking about earlier. So, yeah. So this is chapter 2.
The early car.
Chapter 2 is appropriately titled Cars First, Girls Second, because that's Bob's kind of mantra as he entered college. Bought a car for $50 in a logging camp in northern Minnesota.
Grand Marais.
Barely got it home. Couldn't get it back running properly. Went to the junkyard, and then from there he moved on to a series of other cars, which ultimately led him to his awakening when he saw the first MG in a dealership. He said the light bulb went off and changed his life forever. So that's covered in this chapter in some detail.
Yeah, that's 3220.
Oh, plenty, not a doubt.
Split heads 6. And 6 motor, 2 split heads. And the guy sitting in the car was Bob Carlson, my buddy, who later became not only an Eagle Scout, but a PhD. But here we are, 16 years old, we're down there buying that car in the logging camp. And up comes this great big cruiser guy, very nice guy, but very big car. And he wanted $50 for the car. I said, okay, we give you $50. And I said, well, how do we start it? He said, I'll start it. So you got the crank out. And he spun it a couple times and it fired up. Of course, I was driving, Carlson was sitting next to me. And it was late in the afternoon. So now we're driving out of the logging camp on the highway US 61. This is Grand Marais, Minnesota, almost in Canada. And very little traffic. But coming all of a sudden, there's US Highway 61. And I hadn't tested the brakes. And there were no brakes. So I grabbed the big emergency handle and grabbed big handles I used to have. And we, more than a 90-degree turn, we ended up on 2 wheels in the middle of the freeway, and boom, the lights went out, the engine stopped, it just stopped. Well, although we didn't smoke, we all carried it as typical, we carried simple lighters with us. And we were out there trying to get somebody to see us and stop. And finally this guy stops. And he says, oh, well, I can help you, I can push you. And there's a filling station right down the road about a mile. I can push you there. You can get it started. I said, oh, okay. So he pushes us down there and we get it started. And so now we have the car, the lights are on, and we take off for Grand Marais. Now we're going up the old Grand Marais Trail, up into the Ribes world of the pine trees. The Robbie plant was killing all the pine trees. My dad got us this job. And this is a very narrow, not paved road. And we're going across a kind of an earthen dam. And all of a sudden the lights went out. And I had to stop the car and I looked around 200 feet down there. I don't know what we're going to do now. And then the engine quit. So finally, some other cars came along and pushed us again. We got started and we drove back way to the camp and everything stopped again. So we walked into the camp. And the last story about this car. Months later, Bob Carlson and I were going to drive the car down to Minneapolis. Now this is on North Shore of Lake Superior, northeast of Duluth. So we got up, my dad said, okay, I'll take you up there. So when we drove up there, Dad got out and looked at the car, and he went over. He took his fingers and he poked them right through the fender. The left rear fender where it joins the body. He said, pie crust. Just pie crust. I said, oh, Dad. And you can see, that car had semi-truck wheels and tires on it. Semi-truck. With a double snap rings. We didn't know, we brought a jack, we got the tire out, and we were able to take it into town somewhere in Devine. And they're familiar with snap rings. Then this guy fixed the flat. So we got, now we had 4 good tires to go home. And we drove that thing all the way to Minneapolis. And put it in Carlson's garage. His dad had an extra slot in the garage, and we would take it apart and fix it. So over the winter, we took it apart. And when we put it back together, we had a few things left over. And I remember my dad coming to see me. And my God. To get us started, we pushed it down this little hill, and the Carlsons, and it wouldn't start. So we just left it there. And both parents said, that's enough. And they killed us there. That's the story of my first car.
Well, once he had the MG, he was exposed to a lot of new friends. He got into the Lando Lakes region of the SCCA. They invited him out to a field where they had a gymkhana set up. I don't know if all of you know what a gymkhana is. It's essentially a course through the field, and it's all based on driver skill and time. And he did quite well at that. And the picture below is the typical gathering of sports cars and friends. And from that, he went into a little bit of ice racing there, which is Minnesota after all. So there was ice racing on the lake, and he had quite an experience with that, did well at that. And then he moved on to college. Unfortunately, his major in his freshman year in college was boogie-woogie piano and pool playing. And that lasted until he got his first year on probation notice. So from there, he kind of rededicated himself to, actually he had learned piano by listening to his sister practice a lot in the house. And he taught himself that he didn't like the classical music. He liked something a little more upbeat. And he became quite a good boogie-woogie player, is what he tells me. I haven't heard it, but it sounds like it was something, a skill he really had. It played well at college students. He played a lot of fraternity parties.
Oh yeah. And Freshmen's United night, I was on the stage. They selected a dozen freshmen to perform on stage. And I was second to last. And I was really playing very well boogie woogie. I like to take contemporary songs and mix them with the boogie woogie beat. Now, people still love boogie woogie. They still love the beat. It's just terrific. Yes, I see if you had said. But I was next to last. The last performer was Gene Krupa. Before he became Gene Krupa. Yeah, there he was. So that was my introduction of myself to the university. They didn't seem to care much.
So after he rededicated himself, one of the other things he did was, by the way, you were a psychology major, and what was the other subject? Speech and psychology. Always good for a future car salesman. So one of the other things he did, because he had a long history in the family of military service, including his uncle that you mentioned, he joined the U.S. Air Force ROTC. And he did really well in that and kept advancing and moving up and moving up. And wasn't sure where that was going to lead him because he was hoping to finish his degree and then go into the Air Force for his career, then go on to something else. Almost didn't make it out, almost didn't make it through the ROTC. He wanted to be a pilot, and he had a little problem there.
Well, yeah, when you're in ROTC, you're actually on active duty for 2 years, and then you go on active duty for 2 more years. So, my last 2 years, I'm on active duty, and I was elected to Arnold Air Society, and I was made commander of Arnold Air Society. And I brought in, I created the first Angel wing of Arnold Air Society in the United States. I brought up the Tail Spinner, the cadet newspaper. I did all kinds of things. You've never seen anybody so gung-ho. And a lot of, because my cousin, who was a lieutenant colonel and an ace, shot down twice, bailed out on a B-38 and lived. Prisoner of the Germans twice, he escaped once. And the last time he was freed by the Allies. He was a great guy, but he was the personification of the just. You'll see a picture of him in the book. He was head of Flying Training Air Force, Waco, Texas. And he was the ranking officer in all of the military in Vietnam when that started. So I wanted to be like Tink. His nickname was Tink. He just tinkered all the time. And he was a person who couldn't help himself but always speak his mind. And he told me several times I was passed over for bird colonel because they didn't like what I was telling them. And he was just one of those guys, They couldn't get rid of him, and they didn't want him, and they didn't want to promote him. But he should have had stars, He was an ace. Oh, God. Quite a guy. There's later in the book about him. Yeah.
The issue that you ran into was about his colorblind. And that rules you out as a pilot, isn't it? Colorblind?
Yeah.
So, this he found out when he was there, at TC, so he was pretty upset about that whole thing. And he kind of shut down in the ROTC, and they got real mad at him, and they decided they were going to court-martial him.
Well, I came back from summer camp. All days, really, between my junior and senior year, and I came back, and our first class meeting, they informed those of you that cannot pass the flight physical will not get a commission in the Air Force. You'll get a commission in the Air National Guard. Well, I exploded. I just spun out. Not me, no. And that's why I called the meeting instantly. I don't know. This is from the colonel who was teaching this thing. Well, the meaning of the 3 or 4 was they didn't qualify. And after that, I refused to call a meeting with the Arnold Air Society, of which not only I was a commander, but I was a cadet major in my junior year, now going into my senior year. And I didn't get an issue of the Tail Spinner on. I didn't do a damn thing. I was really upset. So they court-martialed me. I'm on active duty, I'm not, I'm in the Air Force. Right, okay. So they court-martialed me, but they couldn't do anything. The court-martial, they couldn't dismiss me from the Corps. They had to remand the whole thing to the Professor of Air Science and Tactics, Colonel Kermit D. Stevens. And he ran a 1,700-man cadet wing. And I had developed quite a rapport with him because of my boogie-woogie. He loved boogie-woogie. Every time we had an Arnold Air Society meeting, we'd have the staffers, and he would ask me to play the piano. And we had a nice meeting of minds. So I walked into his office and reported in this. experiences with Bert Colonel for the ROTC. And so that year, I conducted the meetings with the Honor Bear Society with no rank on my shoulders. All my buddies were out in front of me with rank and everything. And I got the tail turned around that. They made me bring in there and I did the whole stick. And so
That has a happy ending though.
it was a happy ending.
Because
I graduated. Most of my buddies went to the air raid silos and stations in Montana and Canada and so forth, so on now. And my orders were to become the PIO, Public Information Officer, for the United States Air Force, San Francisco, California. I remember Colonel Stevens said something. And so that's all I got.
so a stroke of good luck not only got him out of the courthouse, but it got him to San Francisco. And that really was a key element in his life because it got him to the West Coast, number one. And number two, as the PIO, he was in touch with all the media in the area because he was tied in with the recruiting service. So anything that happened with the Air Force, he was involved with. And there are some very good examples in the book of the kind of things he had got involved with, including his man in charge that you reported to at the Air Force, which we'll get to in a minute. But one of the other things is these two pictures. The bottom one is kind of a typical sort of thing that Bob might do. They had a recruiting booth at the Oakland Roadster Show. But the unique thing about it is the car above was an ex-Indianapolis car with a turbine engine in it. And Curtis LeMay, you might recognize that, head of strategic unit. Curtis LeMay, through his staff, they got Bob to come back to Omaha to advise them on this car, which they were building. And what they were going to use it for was exactly what you see there. They'd take it around and use it as a recruiting tool to show the technology they were involved with and encourage people to come and join. The car did run some exhibition laps at Indianapolis, but never raced. But it was called the Fireboy. As in,
I went back there to the SAC Air Force Base in Omaha. I was there for at least a month on temporary duty. And I didn't meet General May, but I saluted him twice. We've been in and out of the same door every morning. But Colonel Reed Tilley was his PIO, Bert Colonel. And we developed quite a rapport, got along extremely well. He was really a neat guy. And he tried to get me to stay there. He said, one phone call, like General May, and you'd be here. Oh. So I thought about San Francisco. So, thank you very much, Colonel. So, that's how and I advised on that car, and later they shipped it out to me, and we did the tornado show.
So he had pretty good duty in San Francisco. Made a lot of contacts. Had a great time in his 2 years of active duty there. And one of the groups that he was introduced to was, let's see, is that picture? Oh, it's in the back. It was the Lower Grand Avenue Improvement Society, which was a group of sports car enthusiasts that met at a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown in San Francisco, which is still in business. And they just talked about events they want to do and sports cars in general. And that put him in touch with a whole group that was very active in racing. This is the early 50s, so this is pretty early on. The two pictures here, the top picture is Bob in the Lotus. They live at Vacaville or Catati. So you guys can read the caption. I can't see that far. He would, and Jim Lowe co-drove the car, and they finished third in class.
Well, the transmission locked up. It had a little A30 transmission. in third gear. I couldn't get it out. I couldn't do anything with it. I had to leave in third gear. I pulled into the pits. Bill Briggs said, "No, I can't do anything about it. You got to slip the clutch and finish." So I did an hour or so in third gear on the turns and I God. So we finally, I think, finished fifth company.
And the picture down below is really kind of a historic one for primary reason is that's the first weekend race at Laguna Seca. So Bob had sold his car, his trusted friend, and he was working for Shell Cavalli and BMC in the public relations, head of public relations, and they gave him a company car. Well, it's the MGA with a hardtop. And he thought, well, heck, I can't pass up this opportunity. I think I'll enter the race. Bone stock MGA. And he finished just off the podium. And if you look to the picture on the right, that was the race program for the next event, and that's the artist depiction of that.
They got to tell you about that Lowe's Mark 11. Mind you, this is 1956. Very few cars on the road. And Jim Lowe owned the car, and he wanted me to take the car out on the weekend and break it in because he just received it and get used to driving the car. So I went over to Bill Briggs' sports car center in Tuscaloosa, got in the car. They had a license plate on it. We took it up to Bodega back on all those roads. And one of the roads, hardly any cars, just cows. I remember all the cows. Anybody would see this thing and just have an accident, you know. What's this car doing out here? This race car. It didn't happen. I drove it up and down several times and broke it into some miles out and got used to it. That's the story of the car.
Wave to the cows. Now, this is just a little point of interest because it's one of the trophies that Bob won. This was a pretty significant. The Pacific Grand Prix was a major race on the West Coast. And Bob finished first in class, in the retro class, and it's the trophy on the desk behind me. So that, and then Bob donated it to the candy store, and it's for the Hillsborough Concours President's Award. So that's a little bit of Bob's history.
Very big event.
Yeah, it's a major event. This was the amateur race was one thing, and they had all the pros there. Sterling Moss. All those people came over to race because it was a big money race compared to what they were in Europe. Moving on to chapter 7, Bob is really into racing full-time, not full-time, because you saw him doing a job. He was very, very active, did very well.
We were all amateur.
Yeah, and SCCA production was the Racing Drivers Club Driver of the Year for that class. And was a constant competitor at Laguna Seca. So you can see where the tie-in is between his racing and why Tim McGrain wanted an article written about the early days of Laguna Seca. Because Bob was such an active part of it. In the lower left-hand corner is a name some of you might remember, Rod Carveth. Rod was a very active racer. At the same time, he raced Aston Martins primarily, raced overseas, and he had a parts business in San Carlos. I think there's a business card here somewhere. And he and Bob became good friends, and as Bob progressed through working for BMC and then working for Triumph and then working for a couple of dealers, and I think the bottom car was at Hampton Motors.
Yeah, that was sales manager with Don Hampton in 59, I think. No, 59 and 60, 61.
Yeah, he was a sales manager.
The sales manager. And the bottom car was a 62 TR4 that I convinced him to let us race one, so we put it through the shop. And the main mechanic on that car in the shop in 1962 was none other than Phil Riley. Ivan's the room is parked right here. And Phil Riley works on that car, but that's the same car that won that trophy. That the Pacific Grand Prix. The top picture is my car from my own dealership. dealership in '63 and '4 and '5. And that was a terrific car. I don't know all of it since. Well, I was chairman of the rules. In fact, I found the rules enforcement committee. I did
Always thinking.
yeah. With Bob Wickham, he and I put together the rules enforcement committee. We checked the fuel, we checked the weight, we did all those things. And I was down at the Casalonas a motel in Monterey on one event, and I noticed the sports car, Hollywood Sport Cars had this MGB that looked like it was right down on the tires. How can that be legal? And they told everybody that, well, they put 800 pounds of sand in this car and drove it to Vegas and back 10 times and broke the springs. Oh, why they called it? I'll do something like that myself. With that. So that top car, we lowered it, and we had Bruce recaps on it. Remember the Bruce recaps? You know, they gave you extra trip because they were flat on the top. And we lowered the car down so much that the Bruce recaps burned the paint. Yeah. On the fender. Anyway, that car won everything. And there it is, one of the old Turn 9 in Minnesota. I had that Corvette. Trying to remember the guy's name. Wonderful friend. Dan was his name. And that Corvette. That was Ron Roy. Ron. Neat guy. He could never beat me in 2 years. To the point, and he was a Class B champion, to the point where he got hold of my Bob Coldwater report frame, license frames, and put them on his car just as a spoof. He was that kind of a guy. I was hanging around. He was a terrific guy.
One other name you might remember, Rod Carval had a fellow at the parts counter by the name of John Mozart. John went on, apparently did fairly well for himself as well. Also in this chapter, Bob had the distinction because he was doing so well with TR4 on the West Coast. He was invited by Kaz Castor and Triumph to be a member of the 1963 Sebring 12-hour team. So he co-drove with Charlie Gates, Anyway, were two other drivers. They had quite an experience there, but the team finished with the class prize at Sebring. All three of their cars finished the race. By the way, I just ran across in my library a video of that race. So
I have a video.
Yeah. It won't cost you much, but I'll have it. I'll get a copy. But you might tell me a story about your nighttime driving experience.
Right. At Sebring, of course, as you know, it's a 12-hour race, so you race at night as well. And a couple of things. We had road and track was taking lap, this is counting our lap. They're counting all our lap times to keep track of each car and where it was. And right next to the pit, for our pit, was Pedro Rodriguez and Graham Hill in the 4-liter Ferrari, which ultimately won. Can you imagine the cacophony sound that went on between the Italians and the Mexicans in that bit? It was hilarious. But somehow they got that car. Well, it lost its headlights at night. All it had was some parking lights. And the marshal finally determined, well, you got parking lights and they're very good drivers, so we'll continue. So here you're only driving along and looking in the mirror to see these two little points of light coming into it, and he wouldn't pass you. You're going into a turn, he pull it right behind you and follow you through the turn and go around you like a shot, you know. And well, the other thing about what happened when Charlie Gates was driving in the Daily, I'm trying to think of the name of the driver. A Cobra came up behind him, and the Cobra had Nerf bars. hit Charlie, but he hit the tailpipe dead on. And he jammed the tailpipe forward, bending the manifold up front. Charlie comes into the pits, the tailpipe's hanging on the ground, so that we wire it all back up, send Charlie out again. And eventually he comes back in, and I jump in the car. And by this time, we're in the evening hours, I guess. And the car started to smoke. Now, these are coupes. Yeah, we had the hard top on. And the car, what's that smoke coming out on the passenger side? It's on fire. It what's trying to light the transmission cover or something. So I pulled into the pits and I said, oh, God, you know, it's probably the exhaust that's kinked. And it's kicking the exhaust straight up instead of straight out. And the guy said, you come back in a couple laps, I got an idea. So I went on, I drove around for a couple laps, and I came in. They had gone out to all the hot dog stands and got the mustard and the ketchup plastic bottles, emptied them, filled them with water, and they were stuffing them in between the seats and the door pockets of any part they could. So here I am going down the straight at 130 miles an hour, and I put the L1, and I was taking this thing, putting the fire out. They told me afterwards that they got downshifting going into the airplane, they could see the cab light up. So when we finished the race, Charlie and I were sharing a room. We got back to the hotel and I said, Charlie, why is the air conditioning on? We don't need air conditioning. He said, Bob, the air conditioning's not on. It must be your ears. Oh, yeah. What was my ears? Yeah. So that was Sebring.
Well, during that same year, Bob became a car dealer at 30 years old, 1963. He bought this failing dealership up in San Bruno with the help of Mr. Carvath and his dad. They were all investors in it, and that started the career. So a psychology and speech major, piano player, and ROTC officer has a car dealership at 30 years old. Not too bad from graduating from college and being in this position. Oh, let's go back there. Then quickly thereafter, within 3 years, you had 2 more dealerships. 64, 65,
I had Premier Imports.
Yep.
Yeah.
San Carlos.
I was with you. I started out with Bank of America. Then I went to UCB, United California Bank. I was the head of their loan department for auto dealers. And it turns out that Clint Lillman was Carol Shelby's first banker. And this is another way that I met Shelby. I had met him at Catati in '56 when he raced up there, and afterwards we had a barbecue, and there he was with a couple of calls with that. We chatted. I was assistant regional executive, so I talked to him about him. Quite an affable guy. And so all of a sudden here I'm with Clint, and Clint's a friend of Carol Shelby. And where am I going with this? I'm sorry.
He said he would help you finance the dealership.
Yes, Clint Lillman. Thank you. I had this dealership and I was now with UCB. And Clint called me one day and he said, Bob, I've got a dealership in San Carlos that's failing. It's a Mercedes deal. But Mercedes didn't amount to much back then. And he said, if I loaned you the money, would you take it over? I said, sure. Of course. So I did. So I had Premier Imports and Bob Homer Imports. And we had Lotus and Ferrari and Morgan and Saab and Volvo and Triumph. All these things, Alpha. And did pretty well. And then, yeah, a couple of years later, we opened a big used car lot in San Mateo, that's right. So those are the 3 locations we had early on, yeah.
Chapter 8. Also, you all probably know a good part of that subject. There's some parts you don't. But, this was obviously a dear to Bob's heart. So it's made a good section of the book. Now comes the real fun part. I didn't mention it, but there's 330 photographs in the book. 150 of them are cars. Or more. And this chapter, along with the following chapter, has the majority of it. And this talks about getting involved in the collector car business. He had 3 successful dealerships, doing well, starting to buy cars. And he goes through here a series of some of the more unique cars, and there's a whole, the way the book was structured was we had so many photographs that were important. We'd try and pull out the important ones, like you see here, the special cars. And then at the end we did a gallery. The only drawback to that is there are a lot of pictures in there, but they all required captions. So, where's John? Often that John did a great job. He was a big help in identifying those cars for us. We'd be still writing the book if John hadn't popped in. And one special car that Bob has a little story on, and this car is directly behind you. It's the Lotus Cortina, right smack dab behind you. So tell them about your Cortina.
Well, in '63, when I was in the dealership San Bruno, I became the importer in Northern California for Lotus. So I think in '64, I guess, I decided I would asked to come over to the factory. So I did. I flew over to the factory. And was treated royally. Now, this is when the factory was in Cheshire, which is their first factory, way before they moved to Norwich, where they are now. And this is when Lotus was really not Lotus, yeah. And Colin Chapman was not Colin Chapman in their early days. And as a matter of fact, that car's key fob says Cheshire on it. That's where it was made, the early factory. I can remember being there, watching the lorries pull out from Ford with, to be the Lotus Cortinas. They're painted white with a green stripe, nothing else. Lotus did the rest on the early cars. So, because of my connection, because I was a dealer and an importer, Lotus built 16 SE special equipment, close-thresher gearbox, and more power from the engine and so forth and so on. And so we were standing on the Aerosport Motor Show stand in London, and I'm standing with Colin Chapman, who I met the day before, and Ron Richardson, who was their sales manager. And Colin said, "Do you want one of these cars, Bob?" I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll buy one." So I bought that car. That car is a one-owner 1964, I think made in late 63. But the title says 64 because it arrived in 64. California then wouldn't call it 63, they called it a 64. That's how they titled it back then. So it's a Lotus Cortina Mark I special equipment, 116. It's a one-owner car. That's pretty damn rare. I've had it all these years, and there it is. And Bob Potts, who's standing right back there, has been restoring it for me. And the mechanics, some time ago, Phil Wiley and I was around, did the engine and front suspension, as I recall, and refurbished those things for me. So I drove that car every day for a long time, but not recently. But there it is, never been hit.
I offered him $5,000 for it, he wouldn't take it.
No, I don't get one.
We're kind of skipping around here, but these are the highlights of the chapter. We didn't want to do the whole book, so you'd have an opportunity to discover that as you read it. But one of the major awards that Bob received was the Warren Tryon Award. So we talked about receiving this. It was a surprise.
It was. It was an award they give out every year. I knew Warren Tryon very well. he was a member of the candy store for years, he was very fast. And he worked with manager partners, Don Williams, my longtime dear friend, decades of friendship with Don at Blackwell. And my activities at Pebble Beach, and my first Pebble Beach was 1956, when I was racing in the forest, my TR3. And Jimmy Orr and I walked down to the lodge, which then was just the lodge building, no wings, just the building. And we walked out on the veranda, I remember seeing a lot of imported cars. Of course, they were almost all new. You know, this is 1956, you know. And so I've shown the Pebble like it, I think, about 30 times. And I've won my share of awards back there. And I was a judge for 15 years along with Bob Devlin here and Ed Gilbertson. They became friends. And I was on the steering committee for Santa Claus. And so I've been involved with Pebble for a long time. And they gave me this award for that kind of behavior or activity on my part, which is I really, really thank them very sincerely for, because Lauren was such a great guy, wonderful friend. It's nice to have that award.
It's not true that it's attached to the headboard of your bedroom, is it?
No, it's in my family room. Yeah.
Now we're getting
And
to Pebble Beach.
it lights up.
Yeah, this is Pebble Beach, is all about how his activities at Pebble Beach. Really, that picture should have been after this. You'll learn about how he got involved with it, obviously through his racing, his first contact there. And then the activities grew as he became more familiar with it, not only as an exhibitor and a winner, but also as a judge. And it was just, and you were on the steering committee as well, so he's been heavily involved in Pebble Beach, and thus the award. This photograph is a special one for Bob. The car is a 1914 Klein Duesenberg,
1910.
which Bob purchased sight unseen, being transported from Europe to the United States on a boat he bought. Had it restored, took it to Laguna Seca Historics, did quite well with it the second year, and he was invited to Pebble Beach, and he won an award, and his friend Phil Hill presented it with you.
Yeah, that was a remarkable.
The passenger in this car remained quite still most of the time because of the position of the exhaust.
Yeah, it's really damn terrible letting go. But that car, the engine was done by Phil Riley and Ivan Zaremba. And that's a 1910 board track, won a lot of races. But it had a 1916 Duesenberg double walking beam engine. It had the walking beams were on the side of it, had twin underhead camshafts, 4 valves per cylinder, dual ignitions by a magneto. It was something else. About 100 horsepower, I guess. There is a picture in here somewhere.
It's in the book.
It's in the book.
Connecting rods are like
Connecting rod, connecting rods were that long. And the walking beams are about that long. You know, they're working off the cam against the valves, against the springs for the valves like this. And he got the idea, Duesenberg got the idea from Ocean Liner on the way back from England with their huge walking beam engines. So he built a number of walking beam engines with just 8 walking beams, this had 16 on each side. Can you imagine what's going on in that engine? 2,000 RPM. So I got the hang of driving it It had a Miller updraft carburetor on it. And I was at Archibald's in this race with that little thing he drives all over the world. And his buddy. And they were on the phone. I was right 5th, 6th, 7th, something like that. There were 27 cars in the race, old car show. And I couldn't get the damn thing to run up the hill with one second. Very well. I finally figured out, it's kind of up that carburetor. Maybe if I just eased on the accelerator instead of forward it. Boy, did that work. And I passed everybody except these guys. I finished third. That car had only rear wheel brakes. When you come into turn 2, what were we doing, 90, 100 miles an hour? I mean, the car was kind of saying, "Do you really want to do this?" I'm looking at the wheels, and the brakes are not going to really, I swear to God, you put your foot on the brakes and it went faster. So I pulled on the big brake handle again to get through the turns. But I finished third, and the car was wonderfully restored. So it
And you got an award for that race too.
I got an award at Laguna for that race, yeah. And then I went to Pebble Beach the next day, and Phil Hill awarded me the trophy, and I've known Phil various ways. Phil co-drove the Colorado Grand with me in the Blue Train Bethlehem.
Wait a minute, let's do the Blue Flame. We'll get to the Blue Flame.
Okay.
No, we won't, we're going to go to Salem. There's a great section of the book about the Blue Train Bentley. I don't know if all of you know who the Blue Train Bentley is, but it's quite a story. It's probably one of the most desirable cars in the world. And Bob had the pleasure of owning it for a while. Thanks. John, I believe, was involved in that with a phone call when he was in Hawaii and something. You can buy a car no matter where you are in the world as long as you have a good phone
I
connection.
didn't buy it there, he just told me about it.
So this chapter is one that I think it's the longest chapter in the book because of the length of time that Bob sailed. And he learned in Minnesota when he was a teenager. His older brother got him involved with some of the other fellows, and Bob had the great opportunity to sand and help paint the bottom of the wood boat. But he left sailing behind there, and then he came to California, and in his spare time, he was encouraged to get back into sailing. That led to some really interesting adventures. Like car owners, started with a smaller boat, worked his way to the next larger boat, and so on. But the old spirit of competition never left him. So he decided to go sailing on the bay. And this is not your normal little skiff around the bay. These are big boats, and they're at the top of the level in sailing in the bay. Then he went ocean sailing, including the Transmac, the Pan Am Clipper Series in Hawaii, the race down the coast of Mexico, and was successful in every one of those. And I think he might still be the only one that has the Triple Crown.
Yeah.
It's the Big Boat Series and two others.
Well, the Pan Am Clipper Cup Series, Class A win. That was an international event in Hawaii, 5 races. And with, not this boat, 2 boats after this, was Amazon, a 53-footer. And we won Class A in that Pan Am Clipper Cup. Brought her over to San Francisco and won Class A and St. Francis Yacht Club Big Boat Series. And the next year took it on the Transpac, which I'd done twice with a previous band. And we took San Jose on the 53-footer and won Class A. So that's a Triple Crown.
Yeah. So this is the top level of sailing as far as this is the top level of sailing in the world at this time. And he's done very well in that. And this article, which appeared in the Chronicle, sorry about the quality, but this is a picture of a newspaper article from quite a while ago. So,
that's the Commodore of the Transpac Yacht Club. welcoming a 60 or 70 pound lighter Bob Cole after winning Class A in the Transpac that Navy came in. And I think there's a picture in the book of Hamilton.
Oh, several.
At the finish line.
Yeah.
You'll see, we finished at ninth. This is a 53-foot pole. And we crossed the finish line, which is the Blue Whale with Diamond Head. And we had radio, they knew where we were, they keep track of everybody in the race. They do a super job. And as we crossed, there was this huge flash of light. I mean, it was physical. We just reacted physically. It was nighttime. It just lit the sky up. And they took a photograph of the Zalazan crossing the finish line. And he said, oh,
One other little job he decided to take on was he in co-chairman of his St. Francis Yacht Club challenge for the America's Cup. This was what, a 3-year commitment? 4-year commitment on your part. They threw their hat in the ring, and this is, if you know what America's Cup is, you know what a big deal this is. They got to the point where they built 2 boats for the race, a self-financed, and some sponsors group. They built 2 boats. One was faster than the other. That's the one they took to Perth, Australia. And this is the poster for that event. And how many of you know what company had that slogan at the bottom as their tagline? Remember American Express? Yeah. So they kind of snuck that off and used that. But that was a huge effort, and they came so close to winning that one of the crews that was supposed to be, it was Dennis Conner, wasn't it? One of the crews had already bought their airplane tickets for the return flight. They were so that these guys were going to win, and they ended up winning.
not the cup, the challenge.
Yeah, the challenge.
So this was challenge the cup. We were going. You're talking about the Challenger Series, which is all the other boats other than the one that's holding the cup, which is Australia. And there were 3 American boats. It turned out any one of the 3 of us would have beaten the Australian boat. But Dennis barely beat us. But I will say, and this is the first time St. Francis Yacht Club ever been in the American Cup. And we did dislodge the New York Yacht Club. We were the first yacht club to beat them in 132 years. Yeah, that trophy is still in this club now. But we didn't make it into the final. Dennis barely beat us.
And similar to Pebble Beach, for all his contributions to the St. Francis Yacht Club and a success sailing, they made him an honorary member, lifetime member in the Yacht Club. So it's quite an honor. How many? There's only a few.
There were three of us at the time living.
Yeah.
There are now 4. And that's in the old, nearly 100-year history of the club.
Pretty slick.
Yeah, it's pretty special. Yeah, very.
Chapter 12. This is a catch-all. We had pretty well mapped out the previous 11 chapters, selected all the pictures, wrote the captions on, and as we were going through that process, Bob would come up with another picture or another memory that didn't quite fit in any of the chapters. And since they were written, we decided to put them in this, what we call reflections. And this is an accumulation of stories and experiences that he had throughout his life that are kind of fun. I mean, that was a picture of his, that was about 2 years ago at his shop in Burlingame, which has subsequently changed. He told me at one time, he said, I've got to get my car collection down to 7 cars. He said, I've done so well, I'm up to 13. So, and the other picture at the bottom,
back up to 13 now.
They took a Concorde flight from England back to the U.S. to attend his daughter's wedding. So that's an interesting chapter. It's just they're randomly placed, so they're not chronological. They're just stories as they came up. We put them all and the people he met.
Anybody here been on the Concord? Hey, there's one. You know, it's like being shot out of a cannon. Oh, you just are not ready for this. It's just amazing what that thing did. You know, when it climbs up to it. Well, there's a long story, the whole story's in the book. And I mean, you can see the curvature of the earth, and it's unbelievable. And the way they land, you know, they tip it back to put the delta wings to brake, to slow the damn thing down. And then they put the nose down so the pilots could see. And they got this long landing gear that go. And you land, and you're 2 stories up. Well, it was quite an experience.
The last 2 parts of the book, there's 2 indices. One is a few pages on Bob's favorite sayings. The name of the book is Press On Regardless, which is his #1 motto, if you will. That's what he lived his life by, press on regardless. And these are other quotes that he's read about and liked. So they're in the collection there. Oops, wrong way. And then for those of you who want to speed read, you can go right to the back, and this is a timeline. The significant events by year that took place in his life. And then at the very end, he has a final thought that he wanted to express. And at the last sentence is a quote by Winston Churchill. Book specifics. You're one of the lucky 70 or 80. The others can go to Amazon and buy it. It was a fun effort. We enjoyed it. I learned a lot. You didn't learn much from me. I learned a lot from him. Here's the group that put it together, because without a group of people that could work well together, you can't get a project like this done. I've been involved in other book projects, and I know what it meant. So Bob obviously was the subject. I was what's called a development editor. The book designer was Doris Walker, which John Hoffenbeck introduced us to. She's done several of the car tour books for the candy store. She was great to work with. We did it remotely. She lives in Idaho.
California meeting.
Pardon?
She does the California meeting.
Yeah, that was all right. There's a consultant here, some guy named John Hoffenbeck. And Bob's daughter, Jennifer, did a major proofreading effort right at the end. So it was a great team effort. And who's going to do a little talk on the Candy Store Foundation? Okay, here we go.
So, if you want to start a foundation to support a car club and try to buy the building that you're in, which they've been paying rent for 40 years now, you go to Bob Cole. He's the guy. He knows everything. He started the whole thing. So, where else do you go? So, we have a plaque up by the bar. That's where everything really happens. And that plaque has Bob Cole, founding member of the Candy Store Foundation, and major donor, including a small yacht that we appreciate, and many, lots and lots of support and help and leadership and stewardship for the whole thing. However, I think there's one thing not quite as important, but just as interesting, and that is that, as a racer driver, you drive with the seat of your pants, literally. That tells you what the car's going to do, how it's braking, accelerating, and so he's a real seat of the pants guy. And a while back, we had these well-used chairs for events like this. The padding had pretty much worn out, and they weren't doing well. And somebody in particular was complaining about the quality or lack of quality of these chairs. So I've personally been waiting about 5, 6, how long ago before we got 5 years to present an award to Bob Cole for the first chair of the Candy Store. Yeah.
You'll be able to get your books on the way out. By the front door, there's a table, just walk by and they'll give you a copy of the book. They're pre-signed, so you don't have to stand in line and you won't get writer's cramp. I think you'll enjoy the book. We had a fun time doing it. I learned a lot, as I mentioned, and I think you'll learn a few things that maybe you didn't know. Anybody have any questions?
I'm Jim Griffin.
Hi, Jimmy.
60 years ago, when I went to work for you, I got calls at 444 hours a week.
Let me tell you who this gentleman is. He worked for Dennis Harrington, I guess, at Bob Plummer and Percy San Bruno. When this car was falling in, he's the first mechanic to work on this car in 1964.
Anything else?
Well, I'm late for this group and late to the geography here in San Jose for 30 years. What was the relationship as a dealer or as a arrangement that you had with some of the dealerships down there, the ones in Stevens Creek and Kankakee and Los Gatos? Were you all friendly at all? Did you have a rivalry or did you cooperate on that front?
Good question.
Well, certainly the Volvo dealers, you had that, the bigger the
Well,
Volvo dealers.
I formed the Bay Area Local Dealers Association. We did a lot of spots for Volvo with Bill Walsh. When he had just become the coach for the 49ers. In fact, we did a lot of them right here in the candy store. So I knew the Volvo dealers very well. The one dealer that I knew very well and really cherished the relationship was Bill Smythe. Yeah, Bill and I developed a friendship, did a few things together, and we just got along very, very well. But I've never known many other dealers. So I mean, I knew them, but I didn't know them, you know.
Joe Putnam?
Yeah, Putnam. Interesting story about Joe. Back in Minneapolis again. In the early 50s, before I came out here, in the cars, I was working for, what's his name? A used car lot on Wayne Street, Minneapolis. You know, I was still driving cars up at the lot boy, you know. Later did I know, I used to drive cars. I used to go down to the auctions in Iowa and drive cars back for this guy, this dealership. Many, many years later, Joe Putnam was across the street from me when I had a dealership in California Drive in Burlingame. Remember Putnam? And Putnam was anti-imports. You know, Joe. He was just spitting at imports all the time. It wouldn't have anything to do with imports. Buy American, buy American, buy American. And Joe's that kind of guy, you know. I can't buy American. Well, he, it turns out, also worked for this guy in Minneapolis. Either a year before me or a year after me. And for two guys that I worked for, and he worked, Brown was the other guy's name. Yeah, just unbelievable. Here we are across the street from each other in the dealership. And then, of course, he decided, I think I'll take a chance on the imports. But nothing like a convert, right? Now he has nothing but imports. I don't know Joe very well because we didn't synchronize, you know, but he's quite successful. You're wrong.
Bobby obviously had and have an incredible collection. We said that one car that got away, you never were able to kind of, or is there two-part question, or is there like a unicorn car that you always wish you had some kind of
I think it was that Fiat Tipolino, wasn't it?
No. Yeah.
Tipolino.
Probably so. My God. John can help me with it.
Blue Train?
About an ACL.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I am still very enamored with the pre-war cars, and how they did this, and the magnificent machines, rolling art, just impressive. Like this Bentley out here, this 39 Bentley, 4.25 overdrive, sweet, 1939. Built with a China part board. It was his personal car. How did they do that? And the car I have that I bought, I guess about a year ago, Andre Ambericos' personal Bentley. You've heard of the Ambericos Bentley, probably. It was a very famous Bentley that raced at Le Mans, owned by Ambericos. He was a Greek nickname back in the 30s. The car I bought was a 1935 3.5. Although it's interesting, they call them 3.5s, they're actually 3.7 liters. 3.5 Derby Bentley, designed and built in Paris. So it has some of that beautiful French coachwork, but it's a Derby Bentley, and it was America's personal car. It's never been shown in Pebble. It will be this year. I talked to Richard Gorman in Miami and Motorworks yesterday, and it's coming along very nicely. It's going to be a ground-up restoration shown in Pebble. There is a picture in the book. I think it's the last picture we put in the book of cars. Yeah. So you'll see it from a rear.
One of the 150 car pictures.
Yeah. But you see, that's what my favorite car is all black. Boy, that's quite a question. I don't know how to answer that, because somebody once told me, just told me your next one.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Anybody have any other questions?
1938 SS-100 Coupe went off. Auto Sport shows
I can't hear. 100 SS Coupe?
You're 100.
100 Coupe.
Yeah, the 100, thanks for remembering that. The SS-100 Coupe by Abbott in England, 1939, 3.5 SS-100 Coupe built for Sir William Lyons, the founder of Jaguar. I first found that car 3 years earlier, I think. When I bought it, owned by David Barber in London, England, who was very well known and established as a fine restorer of pre-war Jags. And he had done an SS-90 for me, which is in the book. But this is a coupe. It's a delightful car, very special car, one-off car. And it won the Lord Montague Award at Pebble Beach for the best British car in the field, presented by Sterling Homes. David had the car all in pieces in England, and I knew about it because of our relationship with the SS-90. And I kept wanting to buy it. I said, no, I'm going to finish this, my car. I've got all the the original equipment manufacturers, stuff going on. I've got all the history. There's the picture of the car, in pieces. I kept gently working him on. So I finally said, David, if you'll restore that car for me, I'll fly you, your wife, and the car over to Pebble Beach. Oh, that got up. So he finished the car, and kind of over-restored it, but that was all right. He was absolutely thrilled out of his mind with his wife to be at Pebble Beach with his restoration. And it was a beautiful restoration. And it took the Lord Montague Award for the best British car in the field. very special car. We took that on the Colorado Grand. Ellen and I, Bob Hutz was on, Phil Riley, no, Phil Riley was with the lieutenant in Colorado. But mind me, this was a prototype car. They called it the prototype too. So it had never been driven really, never been exercised, they'd never taken it anywhere. So we took it on the Colorado Grand up those great mountains, was kept boiling over. And I can remember the emblem on top of the radiator. And I'd be driving up the mountains, and I'd just keep the accelerator right to where I'd see the water bubbling. And I'd back down, it'd go 30 miles an hour up this hill. It finally made it. So finally it got to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. So Pops and I took the hood off. See, the hood was in close to the engine. Be some strings on like the French cars, you know, and had louvers. We had no louvers on the hood, which if I had owned the car, I'd put them in. And I put in a fan, I did all kinds, couldn't do anything. So Potts and I just took the damn hood off, put it in the pickup truck, and drove the rest of the way to Colorado Grand. No questions, no. Great car, wonderful car.
Anybody else? All right, thank you all for coming.